The wail of a hungry infant pierced through the gentle clatter of the Sunshine Diner, silencing conversations and drawing all eyes to the door. There stood a woman in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most of the patrons earned in a month, her hair perfectly styled despite the pouring rain outside, desperation etched across her elegant features. In her arms, a red-faced baby thrashed and screamed, tiny fists pummeling the air in frustration. Marcus Thompson looked up from the grill where he'd been carefully flipping 3 different orders of pancakes, each customized to the regulars' exact preferences. The diner was small, just 12 tables and a counter with 8 stools, but it was spotlessly clean with sunflower yellow walls that had earned the place its name long before Marcus was born. His father had painted them himself 43 years ago, and Marcus religiously touched them up each spring, preserving the exact shade that had welcomed generations of Detroit's working class through their doors. "Daddy, that baby is really loud," whispered Emma from her corner table, where she sat surrounded by second-grade math worksheets and a half-eaten grilled cheese sandwich. At 6 years old, she had her father's warm brown eyes and her absent mother's delicate features, a combination that regularly earned her doting smiles from the diner's regulars. "She sounds hungry," Marcus replied softly, nodding toward his daughter as he wiped his hands on his apron and moved toward the front. The woman at the door was scanning the diner with increasing panic, her eyes landing on each face before moving desperately to the next. Her baby's cries had intensified, drawing looks of both sympathy and annoyance from the lunchtime crowd. "Please," the woman said to no one in particular, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to giving orders, but edged with a vulnerability that seemed foreign to her. "Does anyone have something I could feed her? Anything? She's been crying for over an hour." Doris, the 68-year-old waitress who'd been serving at Sunshine since Marcus was in diapers, approached the woman with a sympathetic cluck of her tongue. "We don't have baby food here, honey, just regular diner fare." The woman's shoulders slumped, and for a moment Marcus saw past the designer suit and diamond earrings to the exhausted mother beneath. He moved forward, stopping a respectful distance away. "How old is your daughter?" he asked, his deep voice gentle. The woman looked up, noticing him for the first time. 8 months, she replied, bouncing the wailing infant in what looked like a practiced motion. "She started solids, but I don't have anything with me. The nanny cancelled last minute, and I had to take her to a meeting, and then we got stuck in traffic, and her formula is at home, and—" She stopped herself, seeming surprised by her own outpouring. Marcus nodded. Decision made. "Give me 15 minutes, he said, already turning toward the kitchen. "But you don't have baby food," the woman called after him. Marcus looked back with a small smile. "I have food, and I have a blender. That's all we need." He gestured to an empty booth. "Have a seat. Doris will bring you some coffee on the house." Without waiting for a response, Marcus disappeared into the kitchen, mind already racing through ingredients. He had a pot of vegetable soup simmering for the day's lunch special. Carrots, sweet potatoes, celery, onions, and a touch of garlic in a homemade chicken broth. Perfect base, but too chunky and spiced for an infant. He worked quickly, ladling a generous portion into a separate pot, straining out the larger vegetable pieces, then pureeing what remained with an immersion blender until it reached a silky, smooth consistency. He tasted it, then removed a portion before adding salt and pepper to the main batch. The baby portion he strained once more through a fine mesh sieve, ensuring no chunks remained that might pose a choking hazard. As the smooth puree cooled slightly, Marcus stepped out to his tiny kitchen garden, just 3 window boxes on the back fire escape where he grew herbs year-round under grow lights. He snipped a few leaves of fresh mint, returning to finely mince them before stirring them into the soup. The mint would aid digestion and add a natural sweetness without sugar. When he emerged from the kitchen 14 minutes later, he carried a small blue bowl with a baby spoon he kept for Emma's younger cousins who occasionally visited. The woman was still in the booth, looking increasingly frazzled as she bounced her screaming child. Her expensive coffee sat untouched. "Here," Marcus said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Let's try this." The woman eyed the orange-hued puree skeptically. "What is it?" "Vegetable soup, pureed extra smooth, carrots, sweet potatoes, a little celery. No salt, no spices, except a touch of fresh mint to help her tummy. I make it for my daughter when she was teething." He dipped the tiny spoon into the mixture, testing the temperature on his wrist, just as he had hundreds of times with Emma. Perfect. With obvious hesitation, The woman adjusted her baby to a sitting position on her lap. The child continued to wail, face mottled with the effort. "May I?" Marcus asked, holding up the spoon. After a moment's pause, the woman nodded. Marcus gently brought the spoon to the baby's lips, making a soft airplane noise that earned him a surprised look from the mother. The infant's cries paused momentarily in confusion, giving Marcus the opening he needed to slip the spoon into her mouth. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The baby's eyes widened, her cries cutting off abruptly. She worked her tiny mouth thoughtfully, then swallowed and opened up like a baby bird, clearly demanding more. "Oh my God!" the woman breathed, watching in disbelief as Marcus offered another spoonful, which her daughter accepted with equal enthusiasm. "She never eats for anyone but the nanny. Even the formula has to be a special organic brand imported from Switzerland that costs $150 a can." Marcus chuckled, continuing to feed the eager baby. "Sometimes the simplest foods are the best. My daughter was the pickiest eater until I started letting her help me in the kitchen. Now she'll try anything she's helped prepare." The woman was watching her daughter with a mix of relief and wonder. "I've never seen her eat like this. What did you put in there, magic?" "Just vegetables and a lot of love," Marcus replied with a shrug. "Sometimes that's all it takes." As the baby's bowl emptied, her eyelids began to droop, the combination of a full belly and the exhaustion of prolonged crying working its sedative effect. Within minutes she was asleep against her mother's chest, one tiny hand still clutching her mother's silk blouse. The woman looked up at Marcus, with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you. You have no idea what kind of day I've been having." "No thanks necessary," Marcus said, standing. "I have a daughter too. I know how it feels when they're upset and you can't fix it. Please let me pay you for the soup at least," the woman insisted, reaching for her purse. Marcus shook his head. "It's on the house. Part of our tradition here. No child goes hungry at Sunshine, regardless of who their parents are." He hesitated, then grabbed a clean-to-go container from behind the counter, filling it with the remaining baby puree. "Here, take this for later. It should keep in the fridge for a couple of days." The woman accepted the container, her manicured fingers brushing against his calloused ones. For a brief moment their eyes met, hers blue and startled, his brown and warm. Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared humanity, despite their obvious differences. "Thank you," she said simply. "You're welcome," Marcus replied with equal simplicity. "Come back any time." As he returned to his grill and his waiting orders, Marcus had no way of knowing that this brief encounter with the woman in the designer suit would change both their lives forever, that the simple act of feeding a hungry child would lead to consequences neither of them could possibly imagine on this ordinary rainy Tuesday at the Sunshine Diner. Victoria Sterling sat in her penthouse office on the 47th floor of Sterling Tower, gazing absently at the Detroit skyline as rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows. The quarterly financial report lay open on her tablet, but her thoughts were elsewhere, specifically in a small yellow diner with worn vinyl booths and the inexplicable miracle of her daughter actually eating. "Mrs. Sterling, the board is assembled in the conference room." Her assistant, Michael, stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral despite having called her name twice already. Victoria blinked, returning to herself. "Thank you, Michael. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." As her assistant retreated, Victoria glanced at the framed photograph on her desk, the only personal item in an office otherwise dedicated to efficiency and achievement. Sophia, captured in a professional portrait at 6 months old, gazing solemnly at the camera with eyes identical to Victoria's own. Those same eyes had lit up yesterday when tasting that simple soup, an expression of pure joy Victoria realized she'd rarely seen on her daughter's face. With a sigh, Victoria gathered her materials for the board meeting, tucking the small container of leftover soup into her designer handbag before heading down the hall. She'd had her private chef attempt to recreate it last night, using organic ingredients that cost 20 times what the diner chef had probably used, but Sophia had rejected it immediately, wailing and turning her face away. This morning, the original soup had worked its magic again, Sophia devouring every spoonful while Victoria watched in continued amazement. There was something about that man's cooking, something she couldn't identify but desperately needed to understand. 3 days later, Victoria found herself back at the Sunshine Diner, this time deliberately. She'd scheduled a 90-minute window between meetings, left Sophia with the new nanny hired to replace the unreliable one, and driven herself in her less conspicuous car, a Mercedes rather than the Bentley, parking a block away. The lunch rush was in full swing, every table occupied, the air filled with the comforting sounds of conversation and cutlery against plates. Victoria hesitated in the doorway, suddenly aware of how much she stood out in her tailored cream pantsuit and Louboutin heels. Before she could reconsider, the older waitress, Doris, she remembered, spotted her. "Well, look who's back," Doris called, making her way over with a coffee pot in hand. "No baby today?" Victoria shook her head, feeling unexpectedly self-conscious. "Just me. I was hoping to speak with the chef if possible." Doris raised an eyebrow. "Marcus? He's in the weeds right now, honey. Friday lunch is our busiest time, but I can seat you and maybe he can step out when things calm down." Victoria found herself directed to a small table in the corner, coincidentally next to where a young girl sat surrounded by schoolbooks. The child looked up, studying Victoria with curious eyes that seemed oddly familiar. "Are you a movie star?" the girl asked, her voice carrying that unfiltered directness unique to children. Victoria smiled despite herself. "No, nothing like that." "You look like one," the girl continued, undeterred. "You're pretty and you dress fancy, like the ladies in Daddy's old magazines." Before Victoria could respond, Doris returned with a menu and a knowing look. "I see you've met Emma. She's Marcus's daughter, comes here after school most days." Understanding dawned, and Victoria regarded the child with new interest. So this was the daughter he'd mentioned. The girl had her father's eyes, warm and perceptive. "It's nice to meet you, Emma," Victoria said, extending her hand formally as she would to any business associate. "I'm Victoria." Emma giggled, but shook the offered hand with surprising grace. "You talk fancy, too. Are you from England?" "Boston originally," Victoria corrected, finding herself charmed despite her usual reserve around children who weren't Sophia. "But I've lived in many places." "I've only lived in Detroit," Emma said thoughtfully, "but Daddy says that's okay because Detroit has everything important already." She returned to her workbook, adding as an afterthought, "If you want to see my dad, you should try the soup. It's the best thing here, and he always comes out when people order the special." Victoria glanced at the laminated menu, which indeed listed a soup of the day as the daily special. When Doris returned, Victoria ordered it along with a cup of black coffee. The soup that arrived, potato leek, according to the small chalkboard by the register, looked nothing like what she'd fed Sophia, but Victoria found herself taking a cautious taste nonetheless. The flavor that spread across her tongue was revelatory, velvety smooth yet complex, with subtle layers of herbs and spices that complemented rather than overwhelmed the main ingredients. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd paid such close attention to something as mundane as soup. She was halfway through the bowl when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the chef, Marcus Thompson. Up close and in better lighting than during their first meeting, Victoria noticed details she'd missed before. He was younger than she'd initially thought, probably early 30s, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested a habitually positive outlook despite circumstances that were clearly modest at best. His forearms, exposed by rolled-up sleeves, showed the kind of muscle definition that came from physical work rather than carefully curated gym sessions. "You came back," he said, recognition clear in his eyes. "How's your daughter?" "Much better, thanks to you," Victoria replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Do you have a moment?" Marcus glanced toward the kitchen, then nodded. "A short one. We're between rush waves." He sat down, giving his daughter a quick smile. "Homework going okay, Em?" "I finished my math," Emma reported proudly. "Just reading left." "That's my girl." He turned his attention back to Victoria. "I'm glad the soup helped. Sometimes babies just need something easy on their stomachs." Victoria set her spoon down. "It wasn't just that. She's always been difficult with food, even with bottles as a newborn. The nannies have tried everything. That soup was the first thing she's ever eaten enthusiastically." She paused, feeling strangely vulnerable admitting this. "The container you sent home, she finished every drop, and when it was gone, she refused all substitutes." A small, pleased smile tugged at Marcus's mouth. "That's quite a compliment from such a tiny critic. I was hoping," Victoria said, choosing her words carefully, "that I might be able to purchase more for Sophia." "Sophia," Marcus repeated. "Beautiful name." "Thank you." Victoria reached for her purse. I'd be happy to pay whatever you think is fair. It would be a tremendous help. Marcus considered her for a moment, and Victoria had the unsettling feeling of being truly seen, not as Sterling Industries CEO or as a woman worth billions, but simply as a mother trying to feed her child. It was a novel sensation. "I don't need payment," he said finally, "but I would like to know what happened to the soup I sent home. Did she like the texture? Was it too thick, too thin? Did she prefer it warmed or room temperature?" The questions caught Victoria off guard. They were so specific, so focused on Sophia's experience rather than on financial transaction. "She seemed to enjoy it exactly as it was," Victoria said. "I heated it slightly, but not hot. She ate every bite, even opened her mouth for more when it was gone." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. 8 months is a transitional time for babies and food. They're discovering textures, flavors. It's important to make those first experiences positive. He glanced at his watch. "I need to get back to the kitchen, but if you can wait 20 minutes, I'll put together something for Sophia to try." Before Victoria could respond, he was on his feet. Can you keep Ms. He paused, realizing he didn't know Victoria's surname. "Sterling," she supplied automatically. "Victoria Sterling." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, a brief recognition of the name, perhaps, but he continued smoothly. "Can you keep Ms. Sterling company while I finish the lunch service? Maybe show her your reading project." Emma nodded eagerly. "I'm doing a report on sunflowers. They follow the sun all day long. Did you know that?" As Marcus returned to the kitchen, Victoria found herself pulled into conversation with a 6-year-old about the heliotropic properties of sunflowers. Strangest of all, she didn't mind. There was something refreshing about Emma's straightforward enthusiasm, so different from the carefully calculated interactions that filled Victoria's professional life. 23 minutes later, Victoria checked her watch twice, aware she would be late for her next meeting. Marcus emerged from the kitchen with 3 containers carefully packed in a brown paper bag. 3 different options, he explained, setting the bag on the table. The original vegetable puree she liked, plus a smoother sweet potato blend that's good for digestion, and a protein-rich lentil puree with mild spices that will help her develop her palate. All natural, all made from scratch. Victoria reached for her wallet, but Marcus shook his head. "Just let me know which one she likes best. That's payment enough." "I can't just take these," Victoria insisted, unused to accepting anything without compensation. Marcus considered her for a moment. "Then bring her back sometime. I'd like to see how she's doing." The simple request disarmed her completely. It wasn't a bid for money or connections, just genuine interest in a child's well-being. Victoria couldn't remember the last time someone had asked something of her that wasn't ultimately tied to her wealth or position. "I will," she promised, meaning it. As Victoria left the diner, paper bag clutched perhaps too tightly in her manicured hand, she glanced back through the window. Marcus was kneeling beside Emma's table, pointing at something in her book, his expression one of complete attention. The scene sent an unexpected pang through Victoria's chest, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. That evening, Sophia devoured the sweet potato blend with such enthusiasm that she actually cried when the container was empty, something Victoria had never witnessed before. As she soothed her daughter to sleep, Victoria found herself thinking of the Sunshine Diner and its chef who created magic from simple ingredients. She returned the following Tuesday, then again on Thursday, each time with Sophia. By the 3rd visit, Marcus had a high chair waiting and a fresh batch of what they now called Sophia's Special ready before they even ordered. He would emerge from the kitchen during lulls to check on them, sometimes sitting briefly to make airplane noises that delighted Sophia into fits of giggles. Each visit revealed more about the diner and its owner. Victoria learned that Marcus opened at 5 every morning to prep the day's specials, before the first customers arrived at 6:30, that he had inherited the place from his father 4 years ago after working there since high school, that his ex-wife had left when Emma was 3, deciding that family life with a struggling diner owner wasn't what she'd signed up for. Victoria found herself sharing snippets of her own life in return, sanitized versions that omitted her company's name and the true extent of her wealth. She spoke of Sophia's father, an ambitious executive who had deemed fatherhood incompatible with his 5-year plan upon learning of Victoria's pregnancy, of the revolving door of nannies who came with impeccable references but couldn't seem to connect with Sophia. of the lonely silence of her penthouse apartment, filled with expensive furniture but very little laughter. On the fourth visit, Victoria arrived to find Marcus uncharacteristically distracted, his usual warm smile strained at the edges. He brought Sophia's meal himself, but didn't linger to watch her eat, as he usually did. Even Emma seemed subdued at her corner table, her normally cheerful chatter reduced to occasional worried glances toward the kitchen. Victoria was just about to leave when the landline behind the counter rang. Doris answered, her face falling as she listened. "Marcus," she called, "it's the bank again." Victoria watched as Marcus disappeared into the back office, his shoulders tight with tension. Though she couldn't hear the conversation, the look on his face when he emerged told her everything she needed to know. It was a look she'd seen countless times across negotiating tables, the expression of someone who had run out of options. She was calculating the tip when she overheard Marcus at Emma's table, his voice gentle despite the strain evident in his posture. "We might need to make some changes, Em. The diner, well, it's having some problems." Emma's small face pinched with worry. "Are we going to have to move again?" "Maybe, but don't worry, we'll be okay. Dad will find another job if he needs to." Victoria watched as Marcus maintained a reassuring smile for his daughter, though his hands trembled slightly as he gathered her schoolbooks. The contrast between his evident distress and his determination to shield Emma from it struck Victoria deeply. This man who had helped her without hesitation was clearly in serious trouble, yet his first concern remained his daughter's sense of security. That night, as Sophia slept peacefully after another successful meal, Victoria sat in her home office, surrounded by financial reports and property valuations. The Sunshine Diner, it turned out, was 34 days away from foreclosure, with an outstanding mortgage balance that represented a mere rounding error in Victoria's personal accounts, let alone her company's. She had made her fortune by recognizing potential where others saw only problems, by seeing possibilities in unexpected places, by trusting her instincts when the numbers told only part of the story. And right now, every instinct was telling her that Marcus Thompson and his struggling diner represented an opportunity she couldn't ignore, not just as a businesswoman, but as a mother who had found an unexpected lifeline in a simple bowl of soup. The Sunshine Diner looked different in the early morning light. Without the bustle of customers or the clatter of dishes, the small restaurant had a vulnerable quality that Victoria hadn't noticed before. She sat in her parked Bentley across the street, watching as Marcus unlocked the front door at precisely 4:45, right on schedule, despite the fact that official opening was still nearly 2 hours away. Victoria had spent the week researching everything about the diner, its neighborhood, and Marcus Thompson himself. What she had discovered only strengthened her conviction that she'd stumbled onto something truly special. The diner had been in the Thompson family for 3 generations, starting as a simple coffee cart, operated by Marcus's grandfather during the automotive industry boom. His father had expanded it into the current location 42 years ago, maintaining its status as a community cornerstone through Detroit's economic ups and downs. What the financial statements couldn't show, but Victoria's careful observation had revealed, was the diner's significance beyond mere commerce. The elderly couple who came every morning and shared a single plate of eggs. The construction workers who relied on Marcus's hearty lunch specials to fuel them through physically demanding shifts. The neighborhood children who stopped by after school, some clearly from struggling families, who always seemed to receive a special treat regardless of what they could pay. The Sunshine Diner wasn't just a business, it was a community institution. And its owner wasn't just a chef, he was a caretaker of sorts, providing far more than food to those around him. Taking a deep breath, Victoria checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. She had deliberately dressed down today, simple black slacks, a cashmere sweater, minimal jewelry. The $3,000 handbag had been replaced with a more modest leather tote. She wanted Marcus to see her, not her wealth, for what she was about to propose. She gathered the portfolio containing her meticulously prepared documents and crossed the street. When she knocked on the glass door, Marcus looked up from where he was mixing something in a large bowl. Surprise flashed across his face before he came to unlock the door. "Victoria? We don't open until 6:30. His eyes took in her appearance, then glanced at the luxury car parked across the street, a slight furrow forming between his brows. "I know," she said. "I was hoping to speak with you privately, before your day gets busy." Marcus hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and bread dough, with underlying notes of vanilla and cinnamon. The morning prep was clearly well underway. "I have a lot to do before opening," he said, moving back behind the counter where several projects appeared to be in progress simultaneously. "But you can talk while I work." Victoria settled on a stool at the counter, watching as Marcus's hands moved with practiced efficiency, kneading dough, checking something in the oven, stirring a pot on the stove. There was something mesmerizing about his movements, a confidence and grace that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. "Where's Emma?" she asked, realizing she'd grown accustomed to seeing the little girl in her corner. "With my neighbor, Mrs. Castillo. She watches Emma in the mornings before school." Marcus glanced at the clock on the wall. "I have 20 minutes before I need to walk her to the bus stop. What did you want to discuss?" Victoria placed her portfolio on the counter. "I have a business proposition for you." Marcus's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "Business proposition," he repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "Your soup changed my daughter's life," Victoria began, choosing her words with precision. "Not just the recipe, but the care and thought behind it. The way you considered her needs even though she was a stranger." Marcus glanced up. "That's just basic human decency, not a business model. But what if it could be both?" Victoria opened the portfolio, revealing the first page of her proposal. "I believe there's a significant untapped market for your approach to food. Quality ingredients, prepared with real care, accessible to families of all backgrounds." Marcus wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter, his expression skeptical. "I'm just a neighborhood diner owner, Victoria. I'm not looking to franchise or expand." "I know you're not," Victoria acknowledged. "But you're also struggling financially. The bank called yesterday about your mortgage, didn't they?" His posture stiffened immediately. "You were eavesdropping?" "Unintentionally," Victoria admitted. "But I'm glad I did, because it made me look more closely at what you've built here. Something worth preserving and sharing more widely." She slid the portfolio toward him. "I'm proposing a partnership. My investment firm would purchase the outstanding mortgage on this property, plus provide capital for renovations and expansion. You would remain as executive chef and creative director, with full control over the menu and food preparation standards. We would develop a line of fresh baby and children's foods based on your recipes, while maintaining this location as both a working restaurant and test kitchen." Marcus was staring at her, his expression unreadable. "Investment firm?" Victoria met his gaze steadily. "Sterling Industries. I'm the founder and CEO." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Sterling? Victoria Sterling. Of course." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I should have made the connection sooner. Your face has been on the cover of Business Week twice. 3 times, actually," Victoria corrected gently. "But that's not relevant to why I'm here." Marcus turned away, moving to check something in the oven that probably didn't need checking. When he faced her again, his expression had hardened. "So what is this really? Some sort of charity project? The billionaire swoops in to save the struggling single dad's little diner?" "This isn't charity," Victoria said firmly. "It's an investment with mutual benefit. Your culinary skill combined with my business infrastructure could create something extraordinary, something that helps more families than just those who can physically walk through your door." She flipped to the financial projections in her portfolio. "I'm offering a starting salary of $80,000 annually, plus a 20% stake in the new venture. Full health benefits for you and Emma. A development team to scale your recipes without compromising quality." Marcus's eyes widened slightly at the numbers before his expression shuttered again. "And what happens to the diner? To my regulars? The kids who come in after school with empty stomachs?" "The diner remains exactly what it is. A community cornerstone, but with upgraded equipment and expanded capacity to serve more people." Victoria turned to another page in her proposal. "And your policy of feeding hungry children continues, with a formalized community outreach program funded directly from profits. Not charity, Marcus. Structured giving that grows as the business grows." She watched as he scanned the detailed plans, his resistance visibly wavering as he processed the possibilities. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. "Why?" he finally asked, looking up from the documents. "Why me? Why this place?" Victoria considered her answer carefully. "Because you solved a problem for me that money couldn't fix. Because you created something in that kitchen that makes my daughter happier than anything her privileged life has offered her so far." She paused, and because I believe there are many more Sophias out there who could benefit from your gift. Marcus closed the portfolio slowly. I need time to think about this. It's a lot. Of course, Victoria agreed. Take all the time you need. She reached into her tote and pulled out a business card with her private number, handwritten on the back. Call me when you're ready to talk further. No pressure, no deadlines. Marcus accepted the card, studying it for a moment before tucking it into his shirt pocket. I need to go get Emma now, he said, glancing at the clock. You can stay if you'd like. There's fresh coffee, and Doris will be here in 15 minutes to help with opening. After he left, Victoria remained on the stool, sipping the coffee he'd poured for her before departing. It was excellent, rich and full-bodied without bitterness. Like everything else Marcus created, it showed attention to detail and genuine care for those who would consume it. The bell above the door jingled. As Marcus returned 10 minutes later, Emma chattering happily beside him about a science project involving plants growing in different conditions. She brightened when she saw Victoria. Hi, Miss Victoria, did you bring Sophia? Her disappointment was evident when Victoria shook her head. Not today, sweetie. I came to talk business with your dad. Emma looked between them curiously. What kind of business? Marcus smoothed his daughter's hair. Adult business, Em. Nothing for you to worry about. He guided her to her usual table. Better finish your breakfast before the bus comes. You've got that spelling test today, remember? As Emma settled with her toast and juice, Marcus returned to his morning preparations, moving with the same focused efficiency Victoria had observed earlier. She watched, struck by the contrast between his calm exterior and what must be significant turmoil beneath. His financial situation was dire, yet he maintained this atmosphere of steadiness for his daughter's benefit. The maple chowder is almost ready, he said, seemingly to himself as he checked the oven again, and I need to start the chicken stock for tomorrow's soup. Can I help? The words left Victoria's mouth before she fully registered the thought behind them. Marcus looked up, genuine surprise on his face. You want to help prep? Victoria set down her coffee cup. Why not? I'm here, you're busy, and I have 2 capable hands. She glanced down at her simple but still expensive outfit. Though I should probably borrow an apron. For the first time that morning, Marcus's face relaxed into something approaching a smile. There's a clean one on the hook by the refrigerator, but fair warning, this isn't like having a private chef prepare meals in your kitchen. It's hot, messy work. I think I can handle it, Victoria replied, already moving to retrieve the apron. Just tell me what to do. The next hour passed in a blur of activity that Victoria found unexpectedly satisfying. Under Marcus's quiet direction, she washed and chopped vegetables for the stock, measured flour for dinner rolls, and even learned to operate the commercial coffee maker as the first customers began arriving at 6:30 sharp. The work was indeed hot and messy, her cashmere sleeves rolled to the elbows, flour dusting her black slacks. But there was something grounding about it, something real, in a way her usual executive activities often weren't. By 7:15, when the morning rush was in full swing and Doris was calling orders through the service window, Victoria felt she had gained insight into Marcus's world that no amount of financial research could have provided. You're a quick learner, Marcus observed as they worked side by side, Victoria plating eggs while he flipped pancakes with expert precision. Not what I expected from a CEO. I worked as a waitress through college, Victoria admitted, and as a barista before that. I wasn't born with a silver spoon, contrary to what the business magazines might imply. Before Marcus could respond, Doris stuck her head through the service window. Phone for you, Marcus. It's the bank again. Victoria watched as Marcus wiped his hands and disappeared into the small office at the back of the kitchen. Though she couldn't hear the conversation, the set of his shoulders told her enough. When he returned, his expression was carefully composed, but the tension around his eyes had deepened. Bad news? She asked quietly, as they resumed their work. Marcus's jaw tightened. They've moved up the timeline. I have until the end of the month to bring the account current, or they start foreclosure proceedings. Victoria's mind calculated quickly. That's only 11 days. 10, technically. They don't count Sundays. He flipped a perfect golden pancake onto a waiting plate. Guess I need to consider your offer more quickly than I thought. The resignation in his voice bothered Victoria more than she expected. This isn't how I wanted you to make this decision, she said, with a financial gun to your head. Marcus shrugged, but the casualness of the gesture was belied by the tightness around his mouth. Life rarely gives us perfect timing. He He glanced toward the dining room, where Emma was now gathering her schoolbooks, preparing to leave for the bus. "I need to walk Emma to the stop. Can you handle the grill for 5 minutes?" "I'll manage," Victoria assured him, surprised by her own confidence. As Marcus helped Emma with her coat and backpack, Victoria observed their interaction through the service window. The tenderness with which he straightened her collar, the way he knelt to her level to give final instructions about her day, the solemn pinky promise they exchanged before departing. Every gesture spoke of a deep, nurturing bond that transcended their circumstances. Victoria found herself thinking of her own morning routine with Sophia, efficient and scheduled down to the minute, managed primarily by whatever nanny was currently employed. When was the last time she'd knelt to her daughter's level and really connected, without glancing at her watch or checking her phone? By the time Marcus returned, Victoria had made her decision. "I'd like to come back tomorrow," she said, as she untied her borrowed apron. "With my team. If you're open to it, we could sign preliminary paperwork and transfer initial funds immediately. Enough to stop the foreclosure and give you breathing room while we work out the details of the larger partnership." Marcus studied her face, searching for something, perhaps signs of pity or condescension. Whatever he was looking for, he apparently didn't find it, because his expression softened slightly. "Why are you really doing this, Victoria?" "The truth." Victoria considered deflecting with more business rationale, but something about the directness of his gaze demanded honesty. "Because Sophia needs your soup, because Emma deserves stability, because this place matters to people who have very little else they can count on." She paused. "And because I believe in what you're creating here, even if you've been too close to see its full potential." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the sounds of the busy diner filling the silence between them. Finally, he nodded. "Tomorrow, then. Bring your team." The next morning, Victoria arrived with her chief counsel and financial officer, both of whom she'd briefed extensively on the unique nature of this acquisition. The diner was closed for the meeting, a handwritten sign on the door apologizing to regular customers for the inconvenience. Emma sat at her usual table, watching with wide-eyed curiosity as the adults spread documents across 3 pushed-together tables. Victoria had brought Sophia this time, the baby contentedly exploring a wooden spoon Marcus had given her, while the business details were discussed. "These initial funds will clear the mortgage completely," Victoria's financial officer explained, pointing to figures on a document. "The renovation budget will be held in escrow, released in phases as work progresses. Your salary begins immediately, regardless of construction timelines." Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the legal language with careful attention. Victoria had insisted that the agreement include explicit protections for his creative control and the diner's community programs. This wasn't a corporate takeover, it was a true partnership, with Marcus's vision at its heart. "And the soup kitchen program expands rather than contracts," Marcus confirmed, looking up at Victoria. "Absolutely. In fact, we're allocating 5% of all profit specifically for community feeding programs, more as we grow." Victoria bounced Sophia gently on her knee. "It's good business as well as good ethics. Building community loyalty creates sustainable customer bases." As they worked through the details, Emma wandered over to Victoria's side, drawn by Sophia's presence. "Can I hold her?" she asked shyly. Victoria hesitated, her protective instincts flaring briefly before she nodded. "If you sit down first. She's getting wiggly these days." With solemn care, Emma settled into the chair beside Victoria, holding out her arms. Victoria placed Sophia gently in the girl's lap, keeping a supportive hand behind the baby just in case. To her surprise, Sophia immediately settled, looking up at Emma with apparent fascination. "She likes me," Emma whispered, delighted. "She has excellent taste," Victoria replied, watching as her usually fussy daughter reached up to pat Emma's cheek with a drool-covered hand. The easy connection between the two girls stirred something in Victoria's chest, a sense of rightness that transcended business considerations. The signing process took nearly 2 hours, during which Doris arrived to mind the girls while the adults focused on details. When the last document was signed and notarized, Victoria's team packed up and departed, leaving her alone with Marcus in the now quiet diner. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, gazing down at the copies of what he'd just signed. "It's a lot of money to invest in a place like this, in someone like me." Victoria looked around the diner, seeing past its worn surfaces to its heart. The photographs of regular customers on the walls, the children's drawings pinned behind the counter, the sunflower centerpieces on each table that Emma had proudly explained she helped arrange. "I've built my fortune by recognizing value where others don't," she said. "This place has something money can't create. Authenticity. Real connection to the people it serves." She met his eyes directly. "And you have a gift that deserves a wider audience." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, the magnitude of what had just occurred finally seeming to sink in. "I should make something to celebrate. Are you hungry?" The question was so beautifully, perfectly ordinary amid the extraordinary circumstances that Victoria couldn't help but laugh. "Starving, actually." "Good." Marcus moved toward the kitchen, purpose returning to his movements. "I know just what to make." 20 minutes later, they sat at the counter with steaming bowls of soup. Not the pureed variety he made for Sophia, but a rich, hearty vegetable stew fragrant with herbs and spices Victoria couldn't identify. Emma and Sophia had fallen asleep on the bench seat of a booth, the little girl's arm protectively around the baby, both of them exhausted from the excitement. Victoria took a spoonful of the soup, closing her eyes as the flavors bloomed across her tongue. There was something deeply comforting about it, something that went beyond seasoning and technique to touch something primal and nurturing. "This is incredible," she murmured, opening her eyes to find Marcus watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What's in it?" "My grandmother's recipe," he replied. "She called it everything soup because it used whatever was available, but prepared with intention and care." He took a spoonful from his own bowl. "She used to say that food made without love was just fuel, but food made with love was medicine for the soul." Victoria took another bite, considering his words. "She sounds wise." "She was," Marcus agreed softly. "She raised my dad alone after my grandfather died in the Korean War. Opened the first version of this place with just a hot plate and a dream." His gaze drifted to the wall, where a faded photograph showed a smiling woman in a simple apron standing proudly before a food cart. "I think she would have liked you." The simple statement affected Victoria more than she expected. "Why do you say that?" "Because you saw the value in what she started." Marcus's eyes returned to her face. "And because you understand that some things matter more than money." Victoria glanced at their daughters, sleeping peacefully together, as if they'd known each other all their lives instead of just hours. "Yes," she agreed softly. "Some things definitely do." As she continued eating the soup, Victoria felt something shift inside her, a quiet recognition that this partnership might be changing far more than just a struggling diner's financial future. That perhaps in trying to secure a steady supply of soup for her daughter, she had stumbled onto something she herself had been hungering for without realizing it. The warmth spreading through her had little to do with the temperature of the soup and everything to do with the man who had made it, and the legacy of love he carried forward in each carefully crafted bowl. The transformation of Sunshine Diner happened more quickly than anyone expected. What had been planned as a 3-month renovation compressed into 6 frenetic weeks, with Victoria leveraging her connections to expedite permits and contractors, working double shifts to minimize the restaurant's closure. Throughout the process, Marcus insisted on maintaining a temporary food service from a rented food truck parked outside, refusing to leave his regular customers without access to affordable meals during construction. Victoria found herself drawn to the project in ways that surprised her executive team. The CEO, who typically delegated hands-on management, was suddenly appearing at the construction site daily, often with Sophia in tow. She rearranged board meetings, delegated quarterly reviews, and once even conducted a conference call while helping Marcus serve lunch from the food truck when his regular assistant called in sick. "You have flour on your cheek," her CFO informed her during a video meeting, unable to hide his bewilderment at the sight of his meticulously groomed boss looking somewhat disheveled. Victoria simply wiped it away and continued discussing profit projections as if nothing were amiss. The truth was she hadn't felt this energized in years. There was something deeply satisfying about creating something tangible, about seeing immediate results from her efforts, rather than the abstract metrics of corporate success she typically pursued. More surprising still was how naturally Sophia had integrated into the rhythm of their new venture. The baby, who had previously fussed constantly in the Sterling penthouse, seemed transformed in the lively atmosphere of the diner and food truck. She thrived with the attention from Doris and the other staff, cooed at regular customers, and had developed what could only be described as a devoted attachment to both Marcus and Emma. "She's a different child," Victoria admitted to Marcus one evening as they sat reviewing design samples for the diner's new expanded kitchen. Sophia was contentedly playing on a blanket nearby, while Emma showed her a picture book, the older girl reading aloud with dramatic sound effects that had the baby giggling. Marcus looked up from the commercial oven specifications they'd been discussing. "Children respond to environment more than we realize," he said. "Sometimes what looks like a behavioral issue is just a mismatch between a child's needs and their surroundings." Victoria watched as Emma patiently helped Sophia turn a page, the tenderness between the girls making something catch in her throat. "I've had every advantage money can buy, the best nannies, top-rated organic food, educational toys endorsed by childhood development experts, and yet she's happier here, with simple things and people who just see her." Marcus's expression softened. "That's the real magic ingredient, you know, being seen for who you really are, not who someone expects you to be." The words lingered with Victoria long after she'd gathered Sophia and returned to their penthouse. That night, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for once, Victoria found herself wondering if she too had been yearning to be truly seen, rather than viewed through the lens of her wealth and position. The grand reopening of Sunshine Kitchen, the new name reflecting its expanded mission beyond traditional diner service, was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early December. Victoria had initially pushed for a splashy media event with food critics and business press, but Marcus had gently insisted on something more aligned with the diner's community roots. "Let's open the doors at our regular time, serve our regular customers, and let word spread naturally," he'd suggested. "The people who have supported this place for generations deserve to be first through the door, not fighting for space with reporters and cameras." Victoria had acquiesced, recognizing the wisdom in his approach. Instead of a media circus, they planned a simple ribbon cutting with the neighborhood association president doing the honors, followed by a day of service where every meal would be offered at the original diner's prices from 20 years ago, an affordable celebration for the community that had kept the diner alive through Detroit's hardest times. The evening before reopening, Victoria arrived at the completely renovated space to find Marcus alone in the kitchen, meticulously testing each new appliance and organizing stations for maximum efficiency. The new kitchen was 3 times the size of the original, with state-of-the-art equipment and a dedicated area for developing and packaging the children's food line that would become their secondary revenue stream. "Shouldn't you be resting before the big day?" Victoria asked, setting down the box of files she'd brought from her office. "We open in 12 hours. Marcus looked up, a smile warming his features at the sight of her. "Could ask you the same question. Where's Sophia?" "With the nanny. I wanted to finalize these packaging designs without interruption." Victoria moved beside him at the central island, where he was arranging herbs in the new fresh storage system. "You didn't answer my question." Marcus shrugged, the gesture relaxed rather than dismissive. "Can't sleep before opening day, never could. My dad was the same way. He'd spend the night before any special event just tinkering in the kitchen, making sure everything was perfect." Victoria studied his profile, noting the quiet pride in his expression as he surveyed the gleaming new space. Over the past weeks, she'd come to recognize his expressions with an ease that both pleased and unsettled her. The way his eyebrows drew together when concentrating on a recipe, the slight tilt of his head when listening to Emma's school stories, the soft smile that appeared whenever Sophia reached for him. "Are you happy with how it turned out?" she asked, genuinely concerned about his approval, rather than simply confirming the success of her investment. Marcus turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "It's more than I ever imagined possible," he admitted, "but still feels like home, which is what I worried about most." His hand traced the edge of the butcher block island, the one element he had insisted on salvaging and restoring from the original kitchen. "You kept your promise. It's still sunshine at heart, just more." "That was always the goal," Victoria replied, unexpectedly moved by his approval, amplifying what was already special, not replacing it. "Well, mission accomplished." Marcus's smile widened. "Want to help me prep for tomorrow? I'm testing the soup stocks one last time." Victoria glanced at her watch, a reflexive gesture from years of careful time management, then deliberately set down her phone and rolled up the sleeves of her silk blouse. "Show me what to do." For the next 2 hours, they worked side by side in the new kitchen, falling into the synchronized rhythm they had developed over weeks of collaboration. Victoria had surprised herself by how quickly she'd taken to the practical aspects of food preparation. There was a meditative quality to the repetitive tasks of chopping and measuring, a satisfaction in creating something immediately tangible and beneficial. "You have natural talent," Marcus observed, as Victoria expertly reduced a sauce without scorching it, a technique he'd shown her only once before. "Most people overcomplicate cooking. You understand restraint." "Is that a polite way of saying I don't experiment enough?" Victoria asked with a raised eyebrow. Marcus laughed. "Not at all. It's high praise. Knowing when to stop tinkering and let quality ingredients speak for themselves, that's wisdom most trained chefs take years to develop." The compliment warmed Victoria unexpectedly. She was accustomed to recognition for her business acumen, her strategic brilliance, her economic impact, but this acknowledgement of a simpler, more fundamental skill felt somehow more personal. As the evening progressed, Marcus began assembling ingredients for what Victoria now recognized as his signature vegetable soup, the one that had first connected Sophia to him. She watched as he moved with practiced precision, noting how he measured nothing yet achieved perfect consistency. "Will you teach me the recipe for Sophia's soup?" she asked suddenly. "The original one from that first day?" Marcus looked up, clearly surprised by the request. "Of course. It's not complicated. I've watched our chef try to recreate it 5 times, Victoria admitted. "It's never the same. Sophia knows the difference immediately." A pleased smile touched Marcus's lips. "Smart girl." He gestured Victoria closer. "The secret isn't in the ingredients. It's in the intention. Here, let me show you." What followed was unlike any cooking lesson Victoria had experienced. Rather than focusing on measurements or techniques, Marcus guided her through what he called cooking with all your senses, listening to the sound of vegetables simmering to know when they had reached perfect tenderness, observing the subtle changes in color that indicated flavor development, understanding how each ingredient contributed to the whole. "The most important thing," he said as they worked, "is to remember who you're cooking for. See their face in your mind. Think about what they need from this food. Not just calories, but comfort, nourishment, connection." Victoria found herself thinking of Sophia's delighted expression when tasting something she truly enjoyed, the way her small hands would reach eagerly for another spoonful. She realized with a pang that she had witnessed this reaction more frequently at the diner than in their own home. "I've never cooked for her myself," Victoria confessed quietly. "Not once. There's always been staff for that." Marcus didn't respond immediately, letting the admission settle between them without judgment. "It's never too late to start," he finally said. "Some of my best memories with Emma are making Saturday morning pancakes together, even when she was too small to do more than stir the batter badly and make a mess." Victoria tried to imagine incorporating such an activity into their meticulously scheduled lives, the potential for chaos and disorder. Yet the image that formed, Sophia in a high chair, tiny hands covered in batter, giggling as Victoria helped her stir, created a yearning she hadn't anticipated. "I wouldn't know where to begin," she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice surprising even herself. "Begin with this," Marcus suggested, indicating the soup they were creating together. "One meal, one connection. The rest follows naturally." By midnight, they had completed not only the soup, but also prep work for the morning's first service. The kitchen was spotless, ready for its official debut, and an unexpected intimacy had developed in the quiet hours of shared work. "I should go," Victoria said, though with noticeable reluctance. "Big day tomorrow." Marcus nodded, walking her to the door. "Thank you for your help tonight, and for everything else." He gestured around the transformed space. "For believing in this place, in me." Victoria met his gaze, struck by the sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you for the soup that brought us here," she replied softly, "and for seeing Sophia and me as more than just our circumstances." Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of how far beyond business their connection had grown. For a breathless moment, Victoria thought Marcus might close the remaining distance between them, but instead, he simply smiled and opened the door. "See you in the morning, partner," he said. "Bright and early," she agreed, stepping out into the cold December night with a curious warmth blooming in her chest. The reopening exceeded even Victoria's most optimistic projections. Word spread rapidly through the neighborhood and beyond, with lines forming before the doors officially opened at 6:30. By noon, They had served over 200 customers, nearly double the old diner's daily average, with wait times approaching 45 minutes, despite the expanded seating capacity. Victoria had arrived early with Sophia, helping with final preparations, while the baby contentedly played in a custom-built playpen Marcus had installed in the corner of the kitchen, a space specifically designed to keep their daughters safe, but included during busy service times. Emma had proudly donned a child-sized apron with assistant manager embroidered on the front, taking her role of greeting customers with utmost seriousness. She had developed a particularly charming welcome for families with children, personally escorting them to tables equipped with custom activity sheets she had helped design. By mid-afternoon, Victoria had shed her designer jacket and rolled up her sleeves, helping Doris manage the constant flow of orders, while Marcus commanded the kitchen with calm efficiency. There was a rhythm to the work, a purposeful energy that Victoria found exhilarating compared to the abstract challenges of corporate management. "Orders for table 12 are ready," Marcus called through the service window. "And Victoria, there's someone here asking for you specifically." Curious, Victoria approached the kitchen to find a middle-aged woman in a worn but neat coat waiting by the pass-through. She held a sleeping toddler against her shoulder, the child's face peaceful despite the noise of the busy restaurant. "Miss Sterling?" the woman asked hesitantly. "I'm Maria Gonzalez. I just wanted to thank you personally for what you've done here." Victoria accepted the woman's extended hand, noting the roughness of her palm, the hands of someone who worked hard for a living. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Gonzalez. Are you a regular customer?" "For 15 years, the woman confirmed. "But it's more than that. Marcus, Mr. Thompson, he helped my family through some very difficult times. When my husband was laid off 3 years ago, this diner fed our children. Not charity, he always insisted, said it was community." Her eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "I was scared when I heard about the renovations. Thought it might become one of those fancy places where working folks don't feel welcome anymore. But it's still sunshine, still home." Victoria felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. "That was very important to us, to both of us." "Well, you did good." Mrs. Gonzalez adjusted her sleeping child. "And my Lucia here. She loves the new baby food. First time she's eaten well in months. The doctor says she's finally gaining weight properly." Victoria glanced at the peacefully sleeping toddler, then at the woman's worn coat and carefully mended purse, and was struck by the realization that their new packaged food line, priced deliberately to be accessible to working families, was already making tangible differences in children's lives. "Thank you for telling me that," Victoria said sincerely. "It means a great deal." After Mrs. Gonzalez departed, Victoria returned to the kitchen to find Marcus preparing a special order, his hands moving with practiced precision as he arranged a plate with artistic care. "You never told me about helping families during layoffs," she said, watching him work. Marcus shrugged, not looking up from his plating. "Wasn't relevant to our business discussions." "It's absolutely relevant," Victoria countered. "It's the soul of what we're building here." Marcus finally met her gaze. "It wasn't charity, Victoria. It was community. That's how neighborhoods survive. We look out for each other. One month someone needs help. The next month, they're the ones helping someone else. Like how you helped me and Sophia," Victoria said quietly. A small smile touched his lips. "And now you're helping me and Emma. Full circle." The moment was interrupted by Doris calling for more orders, and they returned to the controlled chaos of the successful opening day. By evening, when they finally closed the doors after serving over 300 meals, Victoria's feet ached, and her expensive blouse was stained with coffee, but she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so fundamentally satisfied with a day's work. The staff had departed after cleanup, leaving just Victoria, Marcus, and their daughters in the quiet restaurant. Emma had fallen asleep in a booth, surrounded by congratulatory cards from regular customers, while Sophia dozed in her carrier. "Successful day," Marcus said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne from a bottle someone had gifted them. "Beyond expectations." "The numbers were impressive," Victoria agreed, accepting the glass. But the community response was what really mattered. The Gonzalez family, the elderly couple who cried when they saw we'd preserved their regular booth, the teenagers who asked about job applications. That's the true measure of success. Marcus raised his glass. 2 successful partnerships. Victoria clinked her glass against his. To soup that changes lives. They settled at a table near the sleeping girls, the comfortable silence of shared accomplishment surrounding them. Victoria found herself studying Marcus's face in the dimmed evening lighting, the lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled, the strong profile that reminded her of old-fashioned movie stars from a more genuine era. "I have something for you," she said suddenly, reaching for her purse. "A reopening gift." Marcus looked surprised as she placed a small wrapped package before him. "You didn't need to do that. The entire renovation was gift enough." "That was business," Victoria replied. "This is personal." He unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a framed photograph, the original black-and-white image of his grandmother standing proudly before her food cart, now professionally restored and preserved. Beside it was a new color photograph taken just last week, Marcus and Emma standing in front of the renovated Sunshine kitchen, their expressions mirroring the pride and hope captured in the original image. "Victoria," he breathed, running his fingers gently over the frame. Thank you. 3 generations of Thompsons feeding their community," Victoria said softly. "A legacy worth preserving." When Marcus looked up, his eyes shimmered with emotion. "My grandmother would have loved this place, what we've built together." "Tell me about her," Victoria requested, settling back in her chair with her champagne. "The woman who started it all." As the winter evening deepened outside, Marcus shared stories of his grandmother's determination during Detroit's hardest economic times, of her insistence that everyone deserved to eat with dignity regardless of their circumstances, of the recipes she had created from whatever ingredients were available, but always made special through care and attention. Victoria listened, captivated not just by the stories themselves, but by the animation in Marcus's features as he shared this vital piece of his heritage. She realized that in her initial business assessment, she had recognized the potential of his cooking, but had missed the deeper value, this unbroken thread of compassionate service that made Sunshine truly special. "She taught my father, who taught me, that feeding people is sacred work," Marcus concluded. "That a meal offered with genuine care nourishes more than just the body." "I'm beginning to understand that," Victoria admitted. "Watching how people respond to your food, it's about more than flavor or nutrition. There's something healing about it." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria nodded, surprising herself with how comfortable she felt in this moment of vulnerability. "You've built an empire, achieved remarkable success by any measure," Marcus said carefully. "But sometimes when you watch Sophia with Emma, or when you're here working alongside everyone instead of managing from a distance, you seem more at peace than when you're in CEO mode. Why is that?" The question struck directly at something Victoria had been increasingly aware of, but had avoided examining too closely. She took a sip of champagne, gathering her thoughts. "I built Sterling Industries from nothing," she began. "My parents died when I was 11. I grew up in the foster system, bounced between 7 homes in 7 years. None of them bad, exactly, but none of them mine." She traced the condensation on her glass. "I promised myself I'd create stability, security. Success became the metric for both." Marcus listened intently, his expression one of genuine interest, rather than the calculated sympathy Victoria had encountered from others when she rarely shared glimpses of her background. "By conventional standards, I've succeeded beyond any rational expectation," she continued. "But watching you with Emma, the connection, the simple joy you take in ordinary moments together, I've realized that Sophia and I don't have that. We have scheduled quality time managed by assistants and documented in photo albums, but not the organic, everyday intimacy that you share with your daughter." Marcus considered this. "It's not too late to create that," he said gently. "Emma and I didn't always have what we have now. After her mother left, I was a mess, working constantly, leaving Emma with neighbors, barely keeping it together. It took me nearly a year to realize I was providing for her, but not really being with her." "What changed?" Victoria asked. "I made her my priority instead of just my responsibility," Marcus replied simply. "Started including her in my life, rather than arranging my life around her. The diner became our second home. She did homework in the kitchen, learned to count by helping with inventory, fell asleep in the booth you renovated specially for her." His expression softened with memory. "We built our connection through ordinary moments, not grand gestures." Victoria thought of her own carefully structured relationship with Sophia, the educational playdates arranged by assistants, the professional photographers hired to capture milestone moments, The rigidly maintained schedule that minimized disruption to Victoria's work, but also minimized their time together. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted, the words difficult to speak aloud. "I never experienced it myself." Marcus reached across the table, his hand covering hers in a gesture so natural it didn't occur to Victoria to withdraw. "You're doing it right now," he said. "Being honest, being present. The rest follows from that." Their eyes met, and Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of how much this man and his approach to life had already changed her perspective in ways that extended far beyond their business partnership. The moment was interrupted by Sophia stirring in her carrier, making the small sounds that preceded waking. Victoria moved to attend to her daughter, lifting her with a gentleness that felt increasingly natural. "I should get her home," Victoria said, though with noticeable reluctance. "It's been a long day for all of us." Marcus nodded, gathering the sleeping Emma into his arms with practiced ease. "The real work starts tomorrow. Now we have to maintain the standard we set today." "We will," Victoria said with the quiet confidence that had built billion-dollar ventures. Together, as they prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated at the door. "Victoria, that soup we made last night." "Yes?" "Make it for Sophia yourself tomorrow morning," he suggested. "Just once, see how it feels." The simple challenge lingered in Victoria's mind as she drove home through the quiet Detroit streets, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her car seat. Back in their penthouse, as she settled her daughter into her carefully designed nursery, Victoria found herself thinking not of tomorrow's meetings or quarterly projections, but of the simple soup recipe she now knew by heart, and of the man who had shown her that food made with intention and care could nourish far more than just the body. 6 months transformed Sunshine Kitchen into a Detroit success story that business journals were scrambling to analyze. What began as a single renovated diner had expanded to include a commercial kitchen, producing the increasingly popular Sunshine Starts line of baby and children's foods, now available in 27 stores across Michigan, with distribution deals pending in 3 neighboring states. More importantly to Marcus, they had maintained their community commitment, providing over 6,000 free meals to neighborhood children and establishing a weekly cooking class that taught local families how to create nutritious meals on limited budgets. Victoria stood in the doorway of the diner's private back office, watching unobserved as Marcus demonstrated knife skills to Emma and 2 children from their community program. His patient guidance, the careful way he adjusted their small hands on the handles, the genuine praise he offered for each wobbly carrot slice, it all exemplified what had made their venture successful beyond the financial metrics that typically defined Victoria's concept of achievement. "You're holding that knife like a pro now," Marcus told Emma, who beamed at the praise while carefully cutting celery into surprisingly even pieces. "Just remember to keep your fingers tucked like I showed you." "Like a claw, Daddy," Emma recited seriously, "so I don't cut my fingertips." "Exactly right." Marcus turned to the other children, a boy and girl from the apartment complex down the street, both from families that had once relied on Sunshine's unofficial food assistance program. "Miguel, excellent form. Aisha, maybe a bit slower. Safety first. Speed comes with practice." Victoria smiled, reminded of how her own cooking lessons with Marcus had progressed over the past months. What had begun as a simple desire to recreate Sophia's favorite soup had evolved into regular sessions where she learned not just recipes and techniques, but an entirely new way of relating to food and, by extension, to nurturing itself. "Are you going to stand there all day or join us?" Marcus called without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. Victoria stepped into the room. "I was enjoying the master class," she said, moving to stand beside him. "You're a good teacher." "He's the best teacher," Emma declared loyally, carefully adding her celery to the growing pile of vegetables. "He taught Miss Victoria how to make soup, and she never even cooked anything before." "Emma," Marcus admonished gently, though his eyes held amusement when they met Victoria's. "It's a factual statement," Victoria replied with a smile. "I was culinarily challenged before meeting your father." The comfortable banter between them had become natural over months of working closely together. Their partnership had evolved into a friendship that increasingly blurred the boundaries between professional and personal. Evident in the way they could communicate with just a glance across the busy kitchen, the easy manner in which they now shared responsibility for both their daughters, the late evenings spent discussing business that often meandered into deeper conversations about life and values. Victoria checked her watch. We should wrap up soon. The ceremony starts at 4. Today marked the official opening of the Sunshine Kitchen Food Lab, a new addition to their growing enterprise focused on developing nutritious, affordable meal solutions for families across all income levels. The project combined Victoria's business acumen with Marcus's culinary vision, creating something neither could have accomplished alone. As the children finished their cooking lesson and Marcus helped them clean up, Victoria found herself reflecting on how much had changed in 6 months. The guarded CEO who once measured success in market share and profit margins now regularly appeared in the kitchen with Sophia on her hip, learning to make pancakes from a 6-year-old teacher who insisted that faces made of fruit were essential components. More surprisingly still, Victoria had rearranged her entire life to accommodate these new priorities. She had delegated day-to-day operations at Sterling Industries to her capable executive team, converted a rarely used formal dining room in her penthouse into a child-friendly kitchen where she and Sophia now had breakfast together every morning, and even moved her home office to be adjacent to the nursery so she could remain accessible during conference calls. The changes weren't one-sided. Marcus had embraced the business aspects of their partnership with unexpected enthusiasm, revealing a strategic mind that complemented his culinary talents. He'd become comfortable in boardrooms and investor meetings, translating his passion for feeding people into compelling presentations that had attracted significant funding for their expansion plans. "Ready for the big reveal?" Marcus asked, approaching after the children had been collected by their parents. Victoria nodded. "The media's already gathering. Your speech prepared?" Marcus grimaced. "As much as it'll ever be. Public speaking isn't exactly my strong suit." "You'll be wonderful," Victoria assured him, impulsively straightening his collar. "Just talk about the food and the mission like you do with me. The authenticity is what people respond to." Their eyes met, and that increasingly familiar warmth spread through Victoria's chest. These moments of connection had been happening more frequently, small touches that lingered, conversations that extended late into the evening, shared glances that communicated volumes across crowded rooms. Neither had acted on the growing attraction, both cautious about complicating their successful partnership and mindful of how any change might affect their daughters, who had formed their own deep bond. Emma had become Sophia's devoted playmate and informal caretaker, while Sophia's first clear word had been an approximation of M rather than Mama. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned, a testament to Victoria's organizational skills and Marcus's growing comfort with the public aspects of their business. Local officials praised the economic impact of their expansion. Community members shared testimonials about the difference Sunshine's programs had made in their lives, and business partners spoke about the innovative model they'd created. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he approached the podium with the confident humility that had become his trademark. Though he now owned bespoke suits for such occasions, a birthday gift from Victoria that he'd initially resisted, today he wore his chef's whites, symbolizing his continued hands-on role in the kitchen despite their growing success. "6 months ago, a baby cried in my diner," he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the microphone. "Her mother was desperate, and I did what my grandmother taught me to do. I made soup." A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the audience. "I didn't know that the crying baby belonged to Victoria Sterling, or that the simple act of feeding a hungry child would lead to all of this." He gestured to the renovated space around them, then continued with growing confidence. "But that's how the most important things in life often happen, not through grand plans or strategic initiatives, but through small acts of human connection, through seeing someone's need and responding with whatever you have to offer." Victoria, seated in the front row with Sophia on her lap and Emma beside her, felt her throat tighten as Marcus's gaze found hers. "Sunshine Kitchen isn't successful because we have innovative recipes or efficient distribution models, though we do," he said. "We're successful because we never forgot what my grandmother taught me, that feeding people is sacred work, that food made with genuine care nourishes more than just the body." As Marcus continued his speech, outlining their vision for the food lab and the expanded community programs it would support, Victoria found herself unexpectedly moved by how perfectly he articulated the values that had come to define their partnership. The Marcus Thompson, standing confidently before business leaders and media representatives, was still the same man who had patiently crafted soup for a stranger's crying baby. His core remained unchanged, even as his circumstances had transformed. After the formal ceremony concluded, and the guests moved to the reception area for refreshments, Victoria found herself separated from Marcus by well-wishers and reporters eager for comments. She circulated professionally. Sophia balanced expertly on one hip, a skill she'd developed only recently, but now performed with natural ease. Ms. Sterling, your partnership with Chef Thompson has become something of a case study in our business school, commented a university professor who had been invited to tour the facilities. What would you say is the key factor in your success? Victoria considered the question, watching across the room as Marcus knelt to accept a hand-drawn card from a child in their cooking program. Complementary strengths and shared values, she replied. And recognizing that the most valuable assets aren't always visible on a balance sheet. As the event wound down and staff began cleaning up, Victoria found herself in the now quiet demonstration kitchen, Sophia having been swept off by Emma for their regular exploration time, an activity Victoria once would have supervised anxiously, but now recognized as beneficial for both girls. There you are, Marcus said, entering the kitchen and loosening his tie with evident relief. Hiding from the admirers? Victoria smiled. Just taking a moment, it was a successful launch. More than successful. We've already got 3 school districts interested in the lunch program development. He moved to stand beside her at the central island. None of this would have happened without you, you know. Mutual benefit, Victoria replied, echoing the terms she'd used in their very first business discussion. Your talent, my infrastructure. Marcus shook his head. It's more than that. You didn't just invest in a business model, Victoria. You invested in people, in me, in Emma, in this community. That's what made the difference. The simple truth in his words touched her deeply. Perhaps we invested in each other, she said softly. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a decision forming behind his eyes. Victoria, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. About us. Before he could continue, they were interrupted by Emma's urgent voice. Daddy, Miss Victoria, come quick, Sophia's doing it. They hurried to the adjacent room where the girls had been playing, finding Sophia pulling herself up on a low table, her expression determined as she balanced precariously on wobbling legs. She's going to walk, Emma whispered excitedly. I was showing her my drawings and she just started trying. Victoria knelt a few feet away from her daughter, heart pounding with excitement and a touch of fear. Sophia, she called gently, holding out her arms. Come to Mama. Sophia looked up, her face breaking into a delighted smile at the sight of her mother. With determination that seemed impossible in one so small, she released her hold on the table and took one tentative step forward, then another, her arms outstretched for balance. She's doing it, Emma whispered, clutching her father's hand. 3 more wobbly steps brought Sophia into Victoria's waiting arms, where she collapsed with a triumphant giggle, clearly pleased with her accomplishment. Victoria gathered her close, tears springing unexpectedly to her eyes at this milestone she might have missed in her previous life, of delegated childcare and minimal engagement. Did you see? She asked, looking up at Marcus with shining eyes. Her first steps. I saw, he confirmed, his own expression soft with shared joy. She's remarkable, like her mother. The moment crystallized everything that had changed in Victoria's life since that rainy day, when she'd stumbled desperately into the Sunshine Diner. Not just the business success or the improved relationship with Sophia, but this, the creation of a community where milestones were celebrated together, where joy was multiplied through sharing. Later that evening, after the excitement had settled and the girls were asleep, Sophia in the portable crib that now permanently occupied a corner of Marcus's apartment above the diner, where they often stayed after late work sessions, Victoria and Marcus sat on his small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable silence of deep friendship. You were about to say something earlier, Victoria remembered, before Sophia's big moment. About us. Marcus nodded, turning his wineglass slowly in his hands. I was. He took a breath, then met her gaze directly. These past 6 months working together, watching our daughters grow closer, building something meaningful, it's made me realize how much you and Sophia have become part of our lives, not just professionally but personally. Victoria's heart quickened. You and Emma have become important to us too, she said carefully. I think it's more than that, Marcus continued, setting down his glass to focus completely on her. At least for me. The truth is, Victoria, I've fallen in love with you. Not with Victoria Sterling, the CEO or the investor, but with the woman who learned to make soup for her daughter, who sits on the floor to play despite designer clothes, who sees value in people others overlook. The words hung in the night air between them, honest and unadorned. Victoria found herself momentarily speechless, not from surprise at the content of his declaration. She had felt the same connection growing between them, but from the simple directness with which he expressed it. "I'm not saying this with any expectations," Marcus continued when she remained silent. "Our partnership works beautifully as it is, but after today, watching you with Sophia, seeing everything we've built together, it felt dishonest not to tell you what's in my heart." Victoria set her own glass down, conscious of the significance of this moment. "I'm not very good at this," she admitted. "Relationships, vulnerability. My success in business came partly from keeping people at a distance, from never needing anyone too much." "I know," Marcus said gently. "It's okay if you don't—" "Please let me finish," Victoria interrupted, reaching for his hand. "What I'm trying to say is that you've changed that, changed me, shown me that there's strength in connection, not just weakness." Her voice softened. "I've fallen in love with you too, Marcus, with your integrity, your patience, the father you are to Emma, the way you've helped me become a better mother to Sophia." The smile that spread across Marcus's face held such genuine joy that Victoria felt something shift permanently inside her, the last walls of professional distance and emotional caution crumbling in the face of this honest connection. "So what do we do about it?" he asked, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "I have no idea," Victoria admitted with a small laugh. "My 5-year strategic plans never included this particular scenario." Marcus chuckled. "Maybe for once we don't need a strategic plan. Maybe we just see where this takes us, day by day." "The girls would be thrilled," Victoria noted. "Emma already asked me last week if you could be my boyfriend." "Did she now?" Marcus's eyebrows rose in amusement. "And what did you tell her?" "That relationships between adults are complicated," Victoria replied. "She informed me that I was making things unnecessarily difficult and should just ask him already because he looks at you like princes look at princesses in movies." Marcus laughed outright. "Perceptive kid." "She is," Victoria agreed, finding herself moving closer on the small balcony bench. "So is this where you kiss me? Because I think that's what happens next in those movies Emma mentioned." Marcus's expression softened. "Is that what you want?" In answer, Victoria closed the remaining distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that felt simultaneously like a beginning and a recognition, acknowledgement of what had been building between them through shared work, shared values, and shared care for their children. When they finally drew apart, Marcus kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I should warn you," he said softly. "I come as a package deal. Emma and we're inseparable." "Fortunately, Sophia and I are also a package," Victoria replied. "And the four of us seem to fit together quite well already." As if to prove her point, a small sound from inside the apartment caught their attention, Sophia stirring in her sleep. They both moved immediately to check on the girls, finding Emma had already climbed from her bed to pat Sophia's back soothingly, murmuring the same comforting phrases she'd heard Marcus use countless times. "She was just having a dream," Emma whispered, as the adults appeared in the doorway. "She's okay now." Victoria watched as Marcus knelt beside his daughter, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're a good big sister, Em," he said softly. "But you should get back to sleep now. Is Ms. Victoria staying?" Emma asked, yawning widely as she climbed back into her own bed. Marcus glanced at Victoria, a question in his eyes. "Yes," Victoria decided, suddenly certain. "We're staying." As they tucked Emma back in and ensured Sophia was sleeping peacefully, Victoria was struck by the rightness of this moment. The four of them together in this modest apartment, above a diner that had become the unlikely foundation for something precious and unexpected. Later, as they settled on Marcus's worn but comfortable couch, Victoria nestled against his side in a way that felt both novel and somehow familiar. "We'll need to think about how this affects the business," she said, her practical nature asserting itself even in this intimate moment. "The board will have questions. The media will certainly notice." Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple. "Always the CEO," he teased gently. "We'll figure it out. Together." "Together," Victoria echoed, feeling the rightness of the word. It's strange, I've built an empire worth billions, but this feels like the most significant venture I've ever undertaken. Because it is, Marcus replied simply. Business success can be measured in dollars and market share. It's measured in moments like Sophia's first steps, in Emma learning to trust again after her mother left, in the family we're creating together. Family. The word resonated through Victoria with unexpected power. As an orphan who had aged out of foster care, as a single mother who had deliberately constructed a life that didn't require deep connection with others, the concept of family had always been more theoretical than experienced. Yet here, in this modest apartment with the man who had fed her crying baby on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Victoria Sterling, who had everything money could buy but had never quite found home, finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere, to someone, to build connections stronger than any corporate alliance or strategic partnership. It had all begun with soup, with one person seeing another's need and responding with simple human kindness, with nourishment offered without calculation or expectation of return. 6 months later, as Victoria drifted to sleep in Marcus's arms, she reflected that perhaps the true measure of wealth wasn't in what you accumulated, but in what you shared. That the most valuable investments weren't those that appeared on balance sheets, but those made in human hearts and human lives. That sometimes the most profound business lessons could be found not in Harvard case studies, but in a humble bowl of soup offered to a crying child. In a world that often prioritized achievement over connection, ambition over compassion, Victoria and Marcus had discovered that true nourishment requires both, that loving someone means feeding their deepest hungers for acceptance, for belonging, for being truly seen. That sometimes the simplest gestures, a meal lovingly prepared, a hand extended in kindness, can transform lives in ways that wealth and status never could. Their story reminds us that we are all, in some way, hungry for more than just food. We hunger for connection, for purpose, for the knowledge that our lives matter to someone else. And when we respond to another's hunger with whatever we have to offer, whether a bowl of soup or a business opportunity, whether practical help or emotional support, we create a nourishment that sustains not just the body, but the human spirit. So the next time you notice someone struggling, remember Marcus and Victoria. Remember that opportunities to change a life often arrive disguised as inconvenient interruptions or desperate situations. Remember that the most important ingredients in any relationship are not perfection or wealth or status, but authenticity, compassion, and the willingness to see beyond circumstances to the person underneath. Because you never know when a simple act of kindness, like feeding a crying baby when her mother has nowhere else to turn, might be the first ingredient in a recipe for transformation that changes not just one life, but many, including, perhaps most surprisingly of all, your own.